Huh?
Huh.
Okay, so hello everyone and welcome back to the channel once again, Sticky History. Today's topic is a request left on one of my last videos for Mary Queen of Scots, who is perhaps a slightly overlooked character, maybe, in the Stuart period in England, and also perhaps often confused, could just be me, with Mary Tudor, aka Queen Mary the First of England, aka Bloody Mary, who ruled at the same time as our Mary Queen of Scots. What you may not know about Mary Queen of Scots is that she was ruling the country when the rest of us were still dribbling and staring into space. She was in fact the youngest monarch to ascend the British throne at a ripe old age of just 6 days. Her reign came to an end in 1567 when she was forced to abdicate, and her son, James, took her place on the throne of Scotland and also later England. She was also the Queen Consort to France for a time between 1559 and 1560 while she was married to King Francis II. She was the great niece of infamous Henry VIII, related through her paternal grandmother Margaret Tudor. She was also almost married at the age of 10 to Henry's son, with his third wife, Jane Seymour, Edward, through the Treaty of Greenwich. This was proposed by Henry in order to unite and form a stronger bond between the two nations. However, this treaty was rejected by the Scottish Parliament in 1543 due to the arrest of some Scottish merchants on their way to France, which heightened tensions between England and Scotland. And if you have ever learnt, or perhaps learnt in history lessons about Henry VIII, then no doubt you'll realise that this probably didn't go down too well with him. Not getting what he wanted was not something that he was used to. So consequently, there followed a series of battles between the English and the Scottish with the purpose of forcing the two to marry. This did not come to fruition in the end, as the Scots turned to the French for a hand in the campaigns. The French agreed to create their own marriage alliance, uniting Francis II and Mary Queen of Scots in marriage when they came of age. This was done in exchange for military help against the English, who were causing damage and destruction on their path to force the Treaty of Greenwich. Despite the obvious downside of war, Mary actually came off quite well out of it all. She replaced the drizzle for sunshine and fighting for the arts. At the age of 5, she moved away to France with 4 gal pals and some illegitimate family to spend the next 13 years learning languages, some French culture, the food of course, and getting to know her future husband, who was also the future King of France, Francis II. It wasn't until 1558 that everything started to go particularly pear-shaped again for Mary. When Elizabeth became queen, many people, especially the Catholics, were angered as they saw Mary as the true future Queen of England. It was Henry II of France who first declared his son, Francis, and Mary were the true King and Queen of England. Under the Treaty of Edinburgh, France acknowledged Elizabeth's claim to the throne in England, and both the French and English agreed to take their troops from Scotland. They also agreed to maintain peace. However, due to the recent passing of her mother, Mary was in no state to sign the treaty. When further disaster struck with the death of her husband Francis II from an abscess in the brain, Mary was forced to return to Scotland and continue her rule there. As a devout Catholic, support for her was divided, to say the least. Queen Elizabeth was always wary of her religion and was cautious never to trust her. When questioned by William Maitland of Lethington, the Queen, whilst refusing to name a specific heir in the event of her own death, as she didn't have any children, to avoid conspiracy and plots, Elizabeth did hint that Mary would have good grounds to challenge the English throne with a strong connection to the Tudor family. There was one man, Pierre de Boscal de Chastelar, who was reportedly obsessed with Mary Queen of Scots. He hid under her bed for an audience with her alone, but was found by her security guards and banished from Scotland. But true love knows no boundaries. Once again, he found his way into her quarters and surprised her when she was about to undress. And this was not a mistake he made during the 16th century, and he lost his head. Mary did eventually remarry Lord Darnley in 1561. They were in fact half cousins, but that was okay at the time, and were both very tall for the era. Mary was around 5'11" and Darnley was well over 6 foot. They must have inherited the same genes. This was a worry for Elizabeth, as you can imagine. Both Mary and Darnley were in line somewhere along the way to the English throne. Any children they had would have had an even stronger claim to the throne, which was why Elizabeth was concerned about this union. But she needn't have worried. Lord Darnley betrayed his wife and joined with the Protestant forces that were rallying against her, as he became greedy and wanted more power than came with the title King Consort, which basically meant he was married to the Queen. When Mary refused, he double-crossed her. Neither of them were very happy. In an interesting turn of events, Darnley was murdered after an apparent reconciliation with Queen Mary. A man called Bothwell was supposedly responsible for the attack, though he was later excused by a court. Bothwell did actually go on to marry the Queen after having ambushed her on her way from visiting her son in Stirling. This was a very unpopular union, as you can imagine, with there being speculation to the validity of Bothwell's divorce to his previous wife. It's also fair to say that people were slightly confused as to why she'd agreed to marry the man who was the prime suspect in the murder of her previous husband. And rightly so. People began to turn on Mary, and the lords began to raise their own army. She did confront these troops, though they began to desert her, and their forces began to look pretty weak. Although Bothwell was allowed to get away by the enemies, Mary was captured and held in Loch Leven Castle and forced to abdicate for her son James, who was later known as James VI and First, to take her place on the throne. She was actually amazingly able to escape the castle with a little help from aides. Although she was recaptured, Elizabeth conducted a full trial into the murder of Darnley to see if she was responsible for the death of her former husband. In the meantime, her forces continued to fight on in Scotland. There was evidence proposed against Mary, known as the casket letters, in order to prove her guilt. Though they've never been verified as her own and will never be verified now, they were damning evidence of her implication in the murder. The case was dropped and Mary was never convicted of Darnley's death. Contrary to popular belief, Elizabeth was actually quite lenient with her treatment of Mary. A nice heart there. Can't draw an olive branch. Looked like a twig. She suggested Mary were restored in exchange for a guarantee of the Protestant religion being restored, but this was resoundingly turned down by everyone else in the court. Due to Mary's perceived involvement in the Babington plot to kill Queen Elizabeth, she was tried and sentenced to death. She was executed in 1587 at the age of 44. It took the executioner 3 strikes to get the job done, though when he picked up her head in triumph, it fell back down again. As it turns out, she'd been wearing a wig all this time to cover her short grey hair. A small dog was also found hiding underneath her skirt, which showed itself after the execution taking place and refused to leave her side for some time until it was forcibly removed. Elizabeth accused the people responsible for Mary's death of disobeying her direct instructions, though because of her purposefully vague instructions, she was able to avoid direct blame. Clever. One phrase to sum up Mary's life would have to be live fast, die young. She had been Queen of Scotland and France, could speak 7 languages, including French, Italian, Greek, Spanish, Scots, Latin and English. She had caught smallpox by the age of 17. She was then locked up for almost 20 years by her cousin. and then she was beheaded at the age of 44, though her son continued her legacy and later reigned over Scotland and England. What a mouthful. As always, thank you very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video about Mary Queen of Scots, leave a like and comment down below what you'd like to see next time on the channel. Like I said, this particular video was a request, so I do them. Just comment down below what you'd like to see and subscribe so you won't miss any future Sticky History videos. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.